Ratchet Clank 2 is a game about defeating enemies with insane weapons, but these two are setting a terrible example for the children, wiping out entire planets without a second's thought. It's time to finally instill good messages in these games, and teach people that the best weapon in your galactic arsenal isn't the Rhino, it's a good argument. Can you beat Ratchet Clank 2 going commando without defeating enemies? The only rule we have for this run is to not defeat a single enemy, whether that's via the wrench, Rhino, Clank, or a turret. Absolutely no exceptions. Friendly fire will be allowed, but we don't really make use of this anyway. Essentially, the same rules as the last two pacifist challenges. I can tell you right now, we don't defeat a single enemy in this entire video. There are lots of tricks we've never done before, and you don't want to miss our strategy to take down the infamous thug leader without hitting him once. We jump right into Aranos, where the thief is reportedly hiding with the experiment. We begin by immediately defeating enemies, with me forgetting this is a no-kill run. Take 2. We begin by avoiding a few enemies. This is done easily enough with a simple running side flip. Nothing is really halting our progression until the halfway point, where we get locked in this room. The door will only unlock after we defeat all the enemies here. Now, shockingly, we do have a few options here. The first idea we had was to do a camera flip. As we explained in the last video, we can push the camera right up against Ratchet to make his flips super weird. Now, while camera flips still work in Ratchet Clank 2, they aren't quite as powerful. It looks like we can make this flip, but after about 30 minutes, I called it quits. Time to try challenge mode. NG Plus has a few benefits. The one we're currently interested in is carrying over weapons. There's a weapon in the roster called the Decoy Glove. Normally this weapon is worse than trash. However, for a challenge like this, it is the backbone of your arsenal. With it, we can perform a little speedrun tech called decoy clipping. Because the decoys have collision and can be spawned anywhere, we can run Ratchet right up against the wall and spawn a few beneath him, with their collision pushing Ratchet through the wall. As you can imagine, this is very useful for bypassing pretty much anything. And we can use decoy clipping in this room. Simply decoy clip through this wall and you'll see a later part of the level. Charge boot into it and Ratchet will be at that point, skipping the required combat section entirely. We actually beat this entire challenge through live streams right here on the channel. If you want to catch the next set of challenges live, be a part of the process, or just hang out with me, make sure to join my Discord for the most reliable way to catch when I'm streaming. The rest of the level can be bypassed by doing what I do best, running away from our problems. Oozler, by comparison, is a lot easier, as there are no doors that lock. There is, however, a boss fight against the swamp monster, but this boss fight is completely optional. You can simply jump and hyperstrike. This next part is a bit tricky, but there's a gap in the invisible wall on the far right. Time your extra jumps perfectly, and you can slide through that gap, skipping the boss fight completely. The rest of the MegaCorp store is merely a tutorial for the Dynamo gadget, so most enemies here are pretty easy to just run past. Exploring the swamp isn't too tough either. There are definitely a lot more enemies, but if we make a beeline for depressed Lapras, he will take us to the next part of the level, where we meet this guy, who seems to have some kind of PTSD from watching his co-workers get eaten alive. And we buy the tractor beam, allowing us to move certain platforms, and with that, we are another level down. Mactar seems to be borderline impossible to beat without defeating enemies. There are two different objectives here, completing a fight in the arena and destroying the jamming array. Let's tackle the arena first, because the reward for that is Indoko, which leads us to getting Clank. I'm 99% sure that the arena isn't actually possible to beat without defeating enemies, so get ready for speedy strats. We don't actually get Indoko from the arena, we get it after reaching this platform here. As we're in New Game Plus, we have the charge boots, and looking at the map, charging from here seems possible. And it is. With that, we have technically finished the arena without defeating any enemies at all. The only thing left to do here is to complete the jamming array. We have to spin 6 bolt cranks to expose these cables and blow up the towers. There's an oddly specific thing about these bolt cranks, however. We cannot spin them with enemies nearby. Now, this isn't an issue for the first two, as we can throw a decoy far away, leading the chicken bots far enough away to finish the bolt crank. But later, there are some small platforms with enemies that cannot be led away, and we cannot destroy the towers without spinning the bolt cranks. As such, we've reached a complete impasse, so unfortunately, the Ratchet & Clank 2 without defeating enemies challenge isn't over just yet. Now, I haven't entirely deceived you, the jamming array is impossible to complete, but who said we need to play the levels to complete the game? Ratchet & Clank 2's challenge mode has a very unique attribute, where you can warp to certain areas you've already been to, such as the arenas, the racetracks, and a few extras. These are quite rightly reset with each new playthrough to stop any funny shenanigans. However, if in the previous playthrough you collected all 30 skill points, there is one shortcut that is permanently unlocked: the Snivelak Museum. A really fun Easter egg level where you roam the dev's office and look at all the cut content of the game. It should be noted that this isn't a traditional level. To exit the planet, you use a teleporter and not the classic starship, meaning that the level's code must be attached to another level. Now, looking at the game's mechanics, we can pinpoint exactly which planet this area is linked to: Planet Balden, a level that is much further in the game. Unfortunately, Insomniac wasn't fully asleep when programming this, because the teleporter sends you to whichever level you activated the shortcut. However, if we can kill Ratchet here, easily done by decoy clipping through the level and hitting the death plane, we will respawn in the museum, losing the flag that anchored us to the original level. The game gets a little confused as to where exactly this teleporter is supposed to send Ratchet, and so it simply sends us to where the default location is. Where is that location set? Planet Balden. This skips a staggering 2/3 of the game, and of course skips the jamming array and all combat in it. Now, while we are on Balden, there are a few things of note with that skip. The first is that we haven't unlocked the previous levels, just Balden. If we want to go back through those levels, we will need to complete the jamming array. The second is that this is simply a warp. We don't get the gadgets and items we missed on the previous planets, so we're going to have to complete the game with only the dynamo, tractor beam, charge boots, and whatever kind of tricks we can muster. We aren't beginning too hot. We don't have the levitator, so we can't complete this first segment taking us into the city. But challenge mode has one final gimmick: first person mode. Normally a way of playing the game that'll make any Ratchet fan cry. Unfortunately, the dev who created this mode fell asleep before testing it, probably because they were really behind on sleep. If we enter first person mode, run up to a wall, double jump and mash square, we will then raise to the heavens. Yeah, I'm not too sure why this happens, but it'll be very crucial in the next level. This level is completely filled with tough enemies, but shockingly, defeating them isn't required. Yeah, it's kind of tough getting past them, but throwing down some decoys should distract the enemies long enough to get to the elevator at the end. We reach the halfway point at the tower and are met with a serious problem. Normally you use the gravity boots to walk down the side of this building, but because we've skipped over half the game, we do not have them. The answer to this problem lays in our position. This tower is the highest point in the entire level, so we can possibly charge boot to the next part of the level, right? Insomniac clearly planned for us being silly and made an invisible wall all around this building. But the walls of reality haven't stopped us so far, and they're certainly not about to start. We can decoy clip through this wall. Do not move once you're here. The floor collision extends a bit further past the wall, but not by much. The camera is gonna freak out, so we're going to have to line up via the map, lining up to the final platform here. charge boot across the level, and you should just barely be able to make it past the spiral gravity boot section. And from there, we need to get past a few more enemies before another tower with a similar section as before. This skip is far more simple. Jump out of the 50-story window. As we're falling, we want to hug the left face of this building, and you should be able to just fall through the window, leading us to the end of the level, where we immediately get captured by thugs for less. Did they do the jump strat too? We wake up in prison and are forced to play as Clank. This is going to prove a massive challenge. Clank not only has less movement tech, but the enemies are far more of an obstacle, requiring constant use of the microbots. Normally, you use our boy Hammerbot here to destroy these crates and throw us into the vent. Unfortunately, Hammerbot is surrounded by enemies and cannot make it past them, so we need to figure something out. These crates kind of vibrate, and if we jump into the side at just the right time, Clank can clip past it. We now seem to be stuck. Hammerbot is not here to throw us up, and there is nothing here but a locked door. But as we all know, there is no such thing as a locked door. We can make use of the pretty shoddy collision programming in this game to perform a trick called a Clank clip. This is essentially putting Clank at an angle against a door and using the camera to push Clank through it. To do this, run towards the door at an angle. Once in position, hold L1 and move the camera to something like this. I found lining it up with the vibrating crate helped quite a bit. The next bit is a bit tricky. In quick succession, we want to tap L1 and immediately afterwards hold right up on the left analog stick while pressing square. Done correctly, Clank will be pushed through the door, skipping the entire section. This took about 2 hours for me to do once, but hold out and you will get the skip too. We're not done just yet. Normally, Hammerbot will launch you into the air again, but without him, we're going to need to find another way up. Luckily, we can simply glide against the wall to keep a bit of extra height, and we make the jump. After that, we find another door. Not to worry, I found this one to be far easier to clip through. Stand perpendicular to the door and line up the camera to look kinda like this. Then do the L1 square and right up analog stick thing again, and you should be able to clip through the door. This next area is a bit more complicated. We need to get up here, but we won't be able to get past these giant enemies as they insta-kill Clank. So how are we getting past this? Clank proxies don't just push us through doors, they can also be used to get insane heights. Get Clank right on the corner here and line up the camera to look, again, a bit like this. Tap L1 and square while, this time, holding left, and Clank will fly into the sky. We need to get enough height to land on this ledge, which did take at least 90 attempts. I did hear from several viewers to swap to 4x3, but I'm not too sure if that actually made much of a difference. Once on the ledge, glide down and clip through this final door. After all that, you will have finished this insane skip, clearing the first section without defeating enemies. Now it's time for the Ratchet segment, and immediately we get stuck. We need the gravity boots to walk on the walls here, and without them, this is gonna be a bit tough. We can use first-person mode to travel along this wall. The trick is to not be too close to it, as this wall has some weird geometry. After a little platforming, this takes us to the end of the first section. Do not walk onto the elevator. This will put us back in control of Clank. 3 hours was enough, thank you very much. Instead, what we can do is use first-person mode to travel above the elevator. The second Ratchet section is fully loaded in, and the trigger for controlling Clank is using the elevator, so just don't use it. We next need to travel on the outside of the ship, but once again, no gravity boots. We'll have to use some more first-person shenanigans. We climb up the side and simply walk above the ship, dropping right down to the end of the second Ratchet section. Completing the level like this has the funny side effect of us not having Clank. However, a simple save and reload will reveal he was with us the whole time. Immediate issue, we don't have the infiltrator or the levitator, gadgets needed to clear the next section of the level. But come on, silly technicalities like that haven't stopped us yet. The end of the level is located right next to where we are, way above here. Simply decoy clip into the wall, and we can use first person mode on some of the outside collision to fall right into the room, finally completing Aranos. We reach an impasse as soon as we land on Snivelak. The level begins on an island far away from the city. Normally, you need to swing shot to this lookout tower, and then swing shot again to the bridge area. The swing shot is way back on Induco, which we can visit, but the side effect is that the game will think we don't have Clank, keeping him out of our inventory for the rest of the game. On top of that, the swing shot is locked behind a boss fight, so we need to figure out a solution with the few items we have. And there are a few different things we can do here. The most impressive is a super cool charge hover. Unfortunately, I'm not nearly good enough at this game to perform one of these. So we're going with the slightly easier strategy. Equip the Rhino 2 and charge boot into the watchtower. Once you hit the wall, you will be knocked back slightly. Immediately try to pull off a jump and enable first person mode to then climb up the building. This is kinda tricky to get the hang of, but I was able to successfully pull it off after a couple of minutes. We do need to do this trick again immediately, but again, it's not super tough. Climb up this building and you should now be in the clear. We've still got the rest of the level though. A massive city-wide arena where we need to fight our way past about 50 enemies. However, looking at the map of this area will help us quite a bit. The casual route through this area is this, ending up right next to where we begin. Unfortunately, there is a wall blocking our shortcut. However, as we know, walls aren't actually real. Just decoy clip and boom, you've skipped the really tough encounter. Now it's time for what you've all been waiting for. We are going to beat the infamous 15-minute thug leader boss without hitting him once. I'm not gonna lie, we were quite lost figuring out a strategy. We were simply running around for a bit until we realised that he had taken damage at some point from something. A little more running around revealed that this was in fact from his own laser attack. That can damage him too. Knowing this, we can get him into one of the larger streets and keep circling around him. This will get his lasers to consistently shoot at his legs. This is remarkably a faster way to defeat him than the intended way. So maybe give this strategy a shot the next time you fight him. Smog may not be as difficult as Snivelak, but that doesn't mean it's easy. We're able to get to the end of the warehouse section, but due to our lack of electrolyzers, we cannot activate the elevator, and even first-person mode shenanigans can't help here. The game is programmed to have the elevator be at the top or bottom when it's turned off, and it determines this based on the Y coordinates of Ratchet. If we go too far up, the elevator will simply be above us, stopping us from climbing to the top. So we're going to have to find another way up. Luckily, we can kinda replicate the strategy from Aranos. You can climb the side of the ship in first person mode and walk along the top until we get to the end. Once you're there, simply drop down to the cutscene and you'll unlock Grelbin. Side note, to get back to the ship, we are going to have to do some balancing on the rail, as remember, we don't have the grind boots. Luckily, the grind rail is about a meter in size, so it shouldn't be too bad. Grelbin is considered one of the hardest levels in the entire game. This is exclusively due to the number of very difficult enemies this level is home to. But of course, we can skip past all of this by performing some funny collision detection off this hill to skip right to the end of the level. I was originally very afraid of all these proto-pets, but shockingly the cutscene trigger isn't defeating them, it's simply walking up to the door, allowing us to complete the level no problem. We reach the final level, Yeedle, and this level makes use of all the different gadgets, as well as hosting many different combat encounters. We can skip past the beginning half of this level with some funny collision detection, trademark. We can high jump off these crates and then walk across this area. High jump onto these rocks and charge boot like this. There is just barely enough collision to travel up this mountain with high jumps. And when we reach the top of here, we can charge boot once again. From there, we can jump on top of the building itself, as all of this has collision. And funnily, we can just walk through the rock because obviously that doesn't have collision. What, are you crazy? Walk up as high as you can and perform one final charge boot into the void. Glide over to the teleporter and you have just skipped the first half of the level. The rest of this level is going to prove very challenging. The MegaCorp factory is filled with enemies, and most of these can shoot at us from the other side of a room. The first room of note is this one with the electrolyzer. Obviously, we don't have the gadget, but even worse, there's a tank here too. We need to throw lots of decoys down to distract them, and then decoy clip through the door. Just pray those decoys last long enough for you to get past. This next room here poses a serious problem too. Normally, you need to defeat these tanks and then a swing shot target appears. Even if we could get that swing shot target to appear, we don't have the swing shot, so first person mode shenanigans it is. We can climb all the way up in first person mode and continue following this wall, all the way around the room, until we drop ourselves right on top of the end of the level. This is a bit difficult as the level isn't exactly loaded in, but we can use the map as a reference. And hopefully, you should have skipped past the rest of the combat. Now for the final boss of Ratchet & Clank 2, the mutated Protopets. How are we going to beat this final boss as a pacifist? There's a small chance of a bomb spawning in the arena. If we let the boss eat it, he will start spewing meteors at us, and if we position ourselves around the Protopet, these meteors can damage him. Now, these bombs only spawn in at phase 2 of the fight, so how do we get to phase 2? We don't really have a way of getting there. Glide to the arena and stand here. Now destroy one of the crates with a weapon, and the Protopet will begin vomiting Protopets off the edge indefinitely. Now, we're going to take out the Rhino and fire individual rockets to proceed to phase 2. This is cheesy, but technically the rule is about defeating enemies, not damaging them. So to complete the pacifist challenge, take out the Rhino. Once phase 2 has begun, we put our super weapon away. This is the only way to kill the mutated Protopet without us doing so. These bombs will be spawning in periodically, and what you're intended to do is use the tractor beam to throw these into him. But if you're too slow, as noted, he will eat the bomb and shoot the meteors at you. And these will actually deal some pretty insane damage when they hit him. If we run around the boss, dodging all of his meteors, most of them will hit his hitbox, getting rid of a lot of health. This can be pretty tough, and this strategy is insanely dangerous. It only gets worse in the final phase, where we also need to dodge these 2 tanks shooting at us constantly. Oh yeah, and we die in 2 hits if we're lucky. The best strategy here is to keep track of which tank you're closer to and focusing on dodging those bullets. You just need to hold out until 2 more bombs spawn in, which unfortunately is completely random. Just hang in there and eventually the Protopet will be defeated without us doing so. And I suppose everyone lives happily ever after, aside from Quark, who has to deal with the crotchetizer. And the Ratchet & Clank 2 Going Commando Pacifist Challenge is complete. Thank you all so much for watching the full video. A specific thank you to all YouTube members, including a guy named Joe, Abigail Regina, Al Gore, Bento Baker Premordis, Bolt Spider, Celestial Nebula, Christian Thornton, D12TRG, David Halleck, Drago, Eco Fox, Friendly Neighborhood Lurker, Gleich the Fox, HH, Hamza Javid, HK Gaming, Hulk338, Invigil, iPod Num3, James K, Jamie Cahill, Nollug, Lilex, LRA, Matt Omega, Meme Sus, Mini Zircon, Moon Dragon, Multibrad X, No One, Husked Plum, Friendship, Raymond Walters, Rero, Ross Thompson, Ryan Michaelborough, Shizoida, Shadow Quasar, Sovereign Leo, Stephen Appleton, The Welsh Ronin, The Overachiever, Charizard, Trevor Lane, Unlucky, Vendor on YTB, Vendrix, Xavier HD, YGoku69, Zanato, _XXPitters98XX_, and thank you all again for watching the video.